Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is 3 o'clock, and you've joined us for the webinar specific to individual applicants looking to apply for a grant from NMDA's Healthy Soil Program. My name is Katie Creighton, and along with Dean Bruce, we are the co-leads for the program. We welcome you to this afternoon's webinar. And as part of helping you feel welcome, if you'll take a moment and feel comfortable introducing yourself in the chat, noting where you're located in New Mexico, and whether you manage land for crop production, for animal production, maybe another purpose. But anyway, we want you to feel welcome, so get connected there in the chat box. A couple of housekeeping items. During the presentation, you'll notice that you're placed on mute, and we'll keep you that way just to keep background noise to a minimum. We also ask that you turn your video off if it's not already turned off. The reason for that is we've got people from across New Mexico, maybe some experiencing some bad weather, so we want to preserve the bandwidth of this event so that everyone has good access to the event. During this time, as your video's turned off, as you're on mute, type those good questions as they pop into your mind. Type them in the chat. Alternatively, you might have a question that's kind of nuanced, so we'll translate best in real time. And in that case, we'll invite you after the presentation to use that raise hand feature. I'll show you where it lives on my screen, and it may reside in a different place on your screen. It may be under reactions. But after the presentation, if you have a real-time question, use that raise hand feature. That will help us see you out of the crowd, and we'll invite you to unmute and ask your question at that point. We offer to you that these slides and a captioned recording of this webinar will soon be posted on the webpage where you got signed up for this webinar. So be looking for the individual applicant's webpage of our website. All right, today's agenda is pretty straightforward. We will refresh on who is eligible to apply for NMDA's Healthy Soil Program grants, what types of projects are eligible, when and where those projects can happen in New Mexico. We'll spend the bulk of our time on this second big box, which is how to apply. And basically, we'll walk through our step-by-step application process, which lives online. We'll take an overview of the grant application cycle and just reflect on some really important dates therein. And of course, we want to leave space for your questions and answers. So we'll be together until 4:30, provided you all have those good questions to pitch our way. First question is pretty basic. Who is eligible to apply for grants from NMDA's Healthy Soil Program? And we've got two categories of applicants that we welcome. So if you'll focus with me on the right side of the screen here, this webinar is for individual applicants. What we mean by that, we're talking non-governmental parties here in New Mexico that are directly engaged in farming, ranching, or another form of land management. So those are individuals, those are businesses, those are nonprofits making application for these monies. You'll see there that the application period launched last week online. So starting January 15th, clear through March 19th. That's when we will close the door on accepting applications for this year's set of grants. And we will not accept late applications, incomplete applications, or those submitted on paper. So I want to put an exclamation point on that for you. The award you can apply for is up to $24,999.99, just south of $25,000. That figure has to include the mileage that your project sponsor will travel to come see you and see your project site, as well as the 15% administrative fee that NMDA will pay directly to your project sponsor. So we'll go through those terms and you'll hear them come up a few times later in the webinar. Now, if you're here as an eligible entity, I'm pointing now to the left side of my screen, those are our governmental entities. And those are defined in law as local governmental entities with proven land management capacity to support healthy soil. So if you are on this afternoon hoping to learn how your Pueblo, tribe, or nation can apply, how your acequia can apply for a grant, how your land grant can apply for a grant, perhaps you're here on behalf of an SWCD or extension, that is a separate applicant type. We hosted a webinar for eligible entities this morning. It was recorded, and you'll find that on our website very soon, along with the slides from this morning's webinar. So again, who we're talking to this afternoon, who should be in this audience, we're on the right side of the screen here, our individual applicants. And at this point, I'll turn it over to my co-lead, Dean Bruce. Dean?
You, Katie. So I'm going to take over and kind of describe, first and foremost, where these Healthy Soil Program funded projects can happen. And as we move to the next slide, we will get into the where. And so basically, HSP funds and projects can occur on lands anywhere in New Mexico. They can occur on any type of operation. This can be cropland, rangeland, irrigated pasture, forest land, orchards, vineyards, all manner of gardens, subsistence gardens, market gardens. So it can occur anywhere there's ag production. There must be an existing relationship to the land. So either you must own it, you must lease it, or you manage it on another's behalf. However, if you do not own the land, you must have landowner permission to implement a soil health project on land in which you do not own. Um, there is no size restriction on these projects, so they can occur on any amount of land. We can accept projects measured in acres or all the way down to square feet. So, next slide, please. Okay, so when can these happen? So as Katie moves to the next slide, this is a huge improvement on the Healthy Soil Program. You can see now that the projects can last up to about 15 months. They will start roughly mid-July of this year, 2025, and they will go all the way until the end of September of 2026. So as you start planning your project, you need to plan around this new time frame that we have implemented for the Healthy Soil Program. And so again, that is mid-July 2025 and ending in September of 2026. So great improvement. Next slide, please. Okay, so what projects are eligible? So as Katie moves to the next slide, we need to get our thinking back wrapped around the five soil health principles. Okay, so the Healthy Soil Program grants must include on-the-ground projects, and they must involve at least one of the five soil health principles. We're fixing to go over those five soil health principles. So as you're brainstorming about your project, keep in mind that at least one of these principles must be used in your project. So the first soil health principle is keeping soil covered. We can do this by planting a cover crop, maybe leaving crop residue in the field to decompose. Or if it's on rangeland, you might implement a prescribed grazing plan to maintain cover on rangeland. Soil health principle number two that you may utilize for your project is to minimize disturbance on cropland and minimize external inputs. Okay, so when we think about minimizing disturbance on cropland, we're primarily thinking about the tillage operations that we use on cropland, and so we want to aim to minimize those tillage operations on cropland. We can also minimize the amount of external inputs such as synthetics or fertilizers or other things that we might apply to our land, but we want to minimize those to the best extent possible. Soil health principle number three is to maximize biodiversity. We can do this by growing different types of plants on our cropland. We may use a different type of crop rotation with our cash crops and our cover crops and things like that to get that maximum biodiversity. We can also manage our grazing to promote rangeland diversity. And what I mean by this is you manage your rangeland in a manner such that you have a healthy ratio of warm season grasses, cool season grasses, forbs, shrubs, everything that's supposed to be out there so that you can maximize your biodiversity on your rangelands. Soil health principle number four is to maintain a living root. And we do this, or we can do this, by growing long season crops, planting a cover crop following a short season crop, or maybe rotating a cover crop into your cash crop rotation. But basically, we want to try to maintain a living root for as much of the year as possible. When we think about rangeland, we think it's a little simpler on the rangeland, but it's still, we need to maintain that balance of warm season grasses, cool season grasses, forbs, and shrubs so that we maintain that living root. And then number five, integrate animals into land management. This can include grazing animals, birds, beneficial insects, or keystone species such as earthworms. We want to get them onto the landscape. We can do this by planting pollinator habitat. We can graze our crop residue. We can follow a prescribed grazing plan on rangeland, or follow a bale grazing plan on rangeland or cropland so that we can get that livestock integration on there onto the landscape. So as you begin to think about these five soil health principles and some of the examples, these are by far not every practice you could use to implement these five soil health principles, but these are just examples to kind of get you thinking about how you would move forward in your project. So next slide, please. So again, just some more examples of projects that have been funded on cropland. We see a no-till drill, seeding a cover crop in the top left-hand corner. There on the top middle, just a picture of a diverse cover crop mix. Also another cover crop mix on the right hand, in the upper right-hand corner. Bottom left-hand corner, we think about pollinator habitat, trying to establish pollinator habitat to improve the pollination of some of our cover crops and things like that. There on the middle and the bottom, we have applying manure or compost. That's on a raised bed situation, but we can also do that on just a standard cropland field as well. And then also applying biochar, other amendments. These are just a sampling of some of the things that we funded in the past on cropland. So as we move to the next slide, we're going to talk about some of the things that we've funded on rangeland. So top right-hand corner, just a picture to kind of give you an example of an intensive rotational grazing system. This includes lengthening your rest recovery periods on rangelands so that you can get that beneficial nutrient cycling going on your native rangelands. We also, as of late, have been implementing subsoiling. This is where a specialized piece of equipment runs through rangeland to try to break up compaction layers, increase water infiltration, stimulate root growth. And so you can see that on the left-hand side. If you follow that line that's drawn there in red, that's the direction of those rows. If you can see them. It's actually minimally disturbing, but produces great benefits to some rangeland that needs a little bit of rehab. And then also we have bale grazing, and we use this to restore cover on bare ground. And this is the strategic placement of bales to utilize livestock integration, hoof action to put organic matter into the ground. And then also there's a required exclusion period so that you can actually give that ground time to recover. So there's some of the things that we've done on rangeland, but again, that's by far not an all-inclusive list of the practices that you may utilize to improve your rangeland soil health. Next slide, please. Okay, and if you're still looking for additional ideas, we encourage you to look at the interactive map that we have placed on our website. The map is now up to date for all fiscal years 2020 through 2024. Each dot on that map represents a project that has been completed or that was funded. And you'll see the red projects. Those are those eligible entity type projects. As Katie mentioned earlier, those local governmental entities with proven land management capacity to support healthy soil. These are those larger projects that maybe an SWCD or an acequia, maybe a land grant took on. And so you can click on those red dots on our interactive map on the NMDA Healthy Soil Program website, and it'll give you a description of their project. But also those turquoise dots that you see there, those are the individual applicant projects. That's you here today. Those non-governmental parties that are directly engaged in farming, ranching, or other forms of land management. Again, you can click on each of those dots, see a summary of the project, see the location of the a pretty close location of the project, and that gives you an idea of some of the vast diversity of projects we've had across New Mexico. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Katie, and we'll move forward with the presentation.
Thank you, Dean. Okay, next question. How do I apply for a grant from NMDA's Healthy Soil Program? Now that you know a bit about the program, how do you access it? And the answer is simple. We place online on the web page specific to individual applicants every little thing you will need in order to make application for our grants. So if you've already landed on this web page, which you must have, you signed up for today's webinar, you will be familiar with our step-by-step application process. And we split that process across 6 steps. So all you've got to do is follow steps 1 through 6 in that order, and you're ready to make application by our March 19th deadline. Perhaps you joined us back on November 7th for our first webinar. We really focused on the first 3 steps of the 6-step process. So we've talked some about contacting the partners for your project. We encouraged people to get started on conservation planning with NRCS. It's got its own earlier deadline. You heard me say the grant application, the whole kit and caboodle, due March the 19th. That conservation planning piece of it needs to be done, not submitted, but done by February 21st. You'll hear about how everything arising from your project looks back to conservation planning as the foundation. And then we encourage people to develop their project. Now, if you're coming to this webinar brand new to the Healthy Soil Program, it's not too late to tackle these 3 steps. We just encourage you to get started as soon as you are able, and to refer back to the recording of that November 7th webinar for more details. Today, we'll really focus on steps 4 through 6. We'll go back over steps 1 through 3, but we'll really focus on steps 4 through 6, working on that online application, talking about project sponsorship, and then ultimately pressing submit by that March 19th deadline. So I'll give everyone a moment here. If you've got maybe you're on a laptop or a desktop and you've got your phone handy, we invite you to take a little snap of that QR code. That's going to take you to the web page that I just referenced, the web page that's specific to individual applicants. So take a beat there, grab a snap of that QR code if you like. That's where we'll be spending the remainder of the webinar for the most part. All right, so I just bounced over from our PowerPoint slides to the website that we're directing you to. So if you grabbed that QR code on that slide I just showed you, this is what your phone should be showing you right now, is this FY26 requirements for individual applicants. For what it's worth, that's fiscal year 2026. That's how we think in things based on our funding cycles here at NMDA. And you heard Dean say that FY26 projects kick off July 2025, and they run clear through September 2026. So when you land on this page, you'll just be reminded of what constitutes an individual applicant. You want to make sure that you fit those parties. You'll note the deadline. We reinforce that here, that it's noon on March 19th, and that we will not accept late, incomplete, or paper applications. Those won't be reviewed. So you want to make sure that your application is on time, it's complete, and it's submitted in its online format that we'll be covering right now. Chances are any question burning in your mind has been asked before in a previous cycle. So we've tried to put those common questions here within our frequently asked questions document, and strongly encourage you to review that as you work through your application. And again, I referenced a November 7th webinar when we really looked at the first few steps of our process. We invite you to check that out as well at your leisure, or you can review the slides for that. If you've not signed up for our weekly newsletter, visit our homepage so that you can do that, or send us an email to this email address, just asking to get subscribed. Dean, I saw your camera come on. Are you ready to talk through what lives on this webpage?
Yes, I'm ready to go when you are.
All right. Take it away.
Okay, so you'll notice the top bar that Katie just clicked open. That's just our application document checklist. And as Katie mentioned earlier, late, incomplete, or paper applications will not be accepted. And so this is just a checklist to help you make sure that you have all the pertinent information to submit for your grant application. And so just overview real quick of what's included here. We do have the images of the project site. We have a web soil survey map that is required as part of your application package, or an ecological site description map if you're working on rangeland. You can either have an NRCS developed conservation plan, or NMDA's conservation planning template for cropland or rangeland, also completed by NRCS, but it's a document that we've developed specifically for the Healthy Soil Program. So you have that option there. If your project includes bale grazing, you must include a bale grazing template, the NMDA bale grazing template that we've provided here. And then today we're also going to focus very heavily on NMDA's timeline and budget template. That's a very critical component of your application, as well as NMDA's letter of support from your project sponsor, signed off on by your project sponsor. So don't just skip the rest of the steps because you see the document checklist. This is just to help you double check that you have everything that you need to submit. But we'll move on to just a quick review of the first initial steps. Step one was to contact your project sponsors. So initially, beginning the application process, you'll need to contact first and foremost USDA NRCS in New Mexico, and they will be the individuals that will help you with the conservation planning portion of the application. And so you need to do that as soon as possible because, as Katie mentioned earlier, the conservation plan or conservation planning template must be completed by February 21st. So you need to get on that as quick as possible. Step number two on that, or as far as the contacting your project sponsors, you will need to contact either your Soil and Water Conservation District, or if you're a member of Pueblo Tribe or Nation, you can contact them for project sponsorship. So that needs to be done also as soon as possible because depending on either your SWCD or your Pueblo Tribe or Nation, you may need to actually visit with them, sit down at a meeting, describe your project so that they can then sign that letter of support that you'll need to submit as part of your application packet. So these two items right here, if you haven't already completed them, do so as soon as possible and start developing that relationship with both USDA NRCS, your local service center, to get conservation planning done, and also your local SWCD or Pueblo Tribe or Nation. So moving on to step two, real quick, we'll go through that. And that is the actual conservation planning process, which starts with developing a soil map using Web Soil Survey. This is an online soil survey, a soil map creator that you can utilize to create a unique soil map for your location. And so we have created a video that goes step by step in either creating a soil map for cropland or an ecological site description map for rangeland. And so we encourage you to jump on that and get on that as quick as possible also because that's good information to have both for the conservation planning process, but also for you as a land manager so that you can understand the soils you're working with, the plants that should be out there. There's a wealth of information provided in either a soil map or ecological site description map. And again, that is linked directly to Web Soil Survey. And if you have issues with that, again, we ask you to watch the video. And if you're still running into problems, you can email the HSP team. Next, you'll need to begin and go through conservation planning with your local NRCS office. There should be an NRCS office located within close driving distance of pretty much anywhere in the state. So we encourage you to get with your local NRCS office and call them up, get a meeting scheduled, let them know that you're applying for the Healthy Soil Program and that you would like to get either a full conservation plan or NMDA's conservation planning template. As a quick side note here, if you do not currently have farm records established with the USDA Service Center, you do not have to do that. You can simply go in and request of your NRCS office that they complete the conservation planning template, and you do not have to create farm records with your local service center. So I just want to let everyone know that it's a very simple process, but we encourage you as soon as possible to get a hold of your local NRCS office and set that up if you haven't already done so. One thing you'll need to kind of have on hand, again, we ask you to have that soil map or ecological site description map if you're working on rangeland. Have that in hand, but also download a copy of either the cropland conservation planning template where Katie has the cursor right now, if you're working on cropland, or download a copy of the rangeland conservation planning template if you're working on rangeland. And so you have that in hand, and there's a little bit of information that you'll need to provide on those. I'm going to go ahead and have Katie real quick, if we can, click open the cropland conservation planning template. Both templates are virtually identical. They have a little bit different type of questions to them, but the content is pretty much the same. This is the cropland template, and you'll notice that we have some instructions up top. The one thing, again, we want to remind you, February 21st, this must be completed. So that means you need to get with your local NRCS office as soon as possible. But as you go through this template, you'll see that there's going to be some information that you as the farmer or land manager are going to provide. One is your name. Uh, Two is just the location of the project area. You can provide that in section range township, a physical address, latitude, longitude. You can click a quick GPS point with your phone if you have that capability. But we also ask for the county in which the project's going to occur. And then the field name, field numbers that the project might occur on. This could be field 1, 2, 3, 4, or this could be the home place, the back 40, whatever you call it, that's fine. But then we also need the size of that field as well. That can be in acres or square feet. Reminder, we have no restrictions on the size of the project, so it can be in acres or square feet. And then the next thing that you as the individual will fill out is we ask you to describe your soil health related goals. So what are your goals related to soil health? And try to be as specific and as detailed as possible. Don't just go with I want to improve my soil health. Look at specific things. You want to improve your yield. You want to improve the types of or diversity of crops that you're growing. Things like that. Try to be as detailed as possible. And then the remaining portion of the document is where the conservation planner will work with you as a land manager. The first part of it is where they're going to kind of interview you, I guess you could say, and describe your current management. Is it dry land? Is it irrigated? Do you have, raised beds? What is the current management? And so that gives us an overall picture of what is currently happening on the land. But then as you move to the next block, this is probably the important part, and this is where you're going to build your project right here. The conservation planner will then, probably walk around your field, maybe poke around in the soil a little bit, ask some more questions. But this is where the conservation planner will actually provide the resource concerns related to soil health that exist on the land that you own or manage. And so this portion right here is very critical for the creation of your grant because your project has to tie back to those soil health related resource concerns that were identified by NRCS. And I encourage you to play a very active role in this. Talk with the conservation planner, ask questions, ask questions to understand what they're talking about, because we just encourage you to develop not only a good plan, but a good relationship with the conservation planner. And then as we move through the document, you'll see this next page is again for the conservation planner to complete. We remind both you and them of the soil health principles that are the backbone behind the Healthy Soil Program. And then we ask the conservation planner to then identify the soil health related resource concerns that they identified and make some recommendations as far as ag practices that they think can be utilized to mitigate those practices or mitigate those resource concerns. I'm sorry. And so this is where I encourage you to take a very active role in asking a lot of questions of the planner, asking, if there's some potential alternatives to the practices that they've recommended. But they'll recommend you a suite of practices to address your soil health related resource concerns. And then they're also going to provide you with some planning criteria. By this, I mean, what field is this going to occur in? When is it going to occur? The planned date. This is a good time to remember that grant period of July 2025 to September 2026 so that you can really stretch out these projects and get the most done in that time period. But this is where they'll identify when that can occur, the amount to be implemented. They can also make recommendations on species for cover crops or native grass planting, things of that nature. And so they'll give you some planning criteria associated with each of those practices that they recommend. And then in the final column, then we again tie that back to the soil health principles, either 1 through 5. And so we want this all tied back together. And then in the bottom page is pretty much just some additional notes that the conservation planner can add to that. And then, of course, the signatures. And again, probably sounding like a broken record here, but February 21st is the deadline to have all of this signed by both you and the conservation planner. And so we need both signatures on there to make it a fully completed document. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and ask Katie to go back to the website, and we are going to continue on with the presentation. I think we're pretty good on time. So we've covered the web soil survey, having that soil map in hand to provide to the conservation planner before they go and visit your field and look at the soil health related resource concerns. We've went over the templates. Again, I didn't go over the rangeland template, but it is virtually identical in format to the cropland template. And finally, if you're going to implement bale grazing as part of your project, you will have to fill out the bale grazing template, or have NRCS fill out the bale grazing template. They will work with you to determine the area, the amount of bales that are needed, the amount of livestock that are needed to complete bale grazing. I'm not going to go too far in depth on the bale grazing template, but if you do run into issues with the bale grazing template, I encourage you to contact me, and I can help you out. But that's only if you are requesting funds for bale grazing as part of your project. So we'll move on to step 3. That's been a quick overview of the first 2 steps. That hopefully most of you are well on your way to completing those first 2 steps. So we're going to move to step 3, and this is where you actually develop your project. So as you're developing your project, you'll see right there on the top, this is a new document this year. It's called the FY26 Project Development Guidance Document. Sounds big and daunting, but it's actually just a really good document for you to use. And so I'm going to have Katie pop that open real quick. And as she's doing that, I highly encourage each and every one of you as individual applicants, or if you're a project sponsor, to take a look at this document. There's a lot of information presented that will help you understand how to put together a project, how you can tie the resource concerns to the conservation practices back to the soil health related resource concerns. So you'll notice it's one big document, but the first page here just kind of gives you an idea of where you're at right now. And so if you are on this document, you're likely in the process of developing your project, and that is step 3. And so again, probably moving beyond step 1 and 2 at this point, you're now at step 3 to where you're actually taking NRCS recommendations and developing a project. As you move to steps 4 and 6, we'll send you back to the Healthy Soil Program page for that information. But use this document after you've completed conservation planning to really fine-tune your project. Of course, we have some instructions as we move down on the page just a little bit how to use this document. So once you've completed the application steps in which you identify your soil health related resource concerns, use this document to help you understand the relationship between soil health related resource concerns and conservation practices. This document is applicable for both individual applicants and eligible entity projects. So we encourage all that are on here again today to print this off and take a look at it. But as we move through the document, um, the second part of it, and all of these blue underlined words here are hyperlinked to a portion of the document. So you just click on it, and it zooms you straight there. But we have a proven practice chart. This is completely new this year. This is something that we have developed internally to help you understand what are some of those practices that we see are now proven to improve soil health. And so we'll get to that here in just a minute, but just know that's there. And it'll also help you understand maybe some alternatives to some of the practices. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of have Katie scroll on down just a little bit more. And I think this next document many of you will be really familiar with. This is not a new document. We created this early on in the program's history to help you as individuals just understand that correlation between resource concerns, conservation practices or agriculture practices, and the soil health principles. So again, we have a reminder of the soil health principles right there, 1 through 5. Again, those are the backbone behind the program, and we want to keep those at the forefront of your mind as you're thinking about how to improve the soil health on your land. So what we've done with this document, so once you've got through conservation planning and NRCS comes out and they've identified some resource concerns, you can reference this document, and you'll see over there on the left-hand side where the Katie scrolling right now is the resource concerns column. And what this does is we have a whole list of resource concerns that may exist that are predominant across New Mexico. I'll put it that way. It may not be every resource concern that ever exists, but these are predominant across New Mexico. So the first one, we'll just use the example of wind erosion. And so if your conservation planner identified that as one of your problems or one of your resource concerns, you can move to this next column and you can see, okay, here's some examples of ag practices that can be utilized on cropland to address wind erosion. We could use cover crops. We could use no-till or reduced till. We could plant some field borders to slow down that wind and protect our soil. Maybe we could use a little bit of mulching. But also, in addition to that, we've provided those 3-digit codes that are highlighted in blue there. And what those correspond to is the 3-digit practice codes that NRCS uses to describe, say, cover crops or no-till. So what that allows you to do is you can click on that link and it will take you to the actual practice implementation requirements and documentation that NRCS uses to plan those practices. There's a wealth of information contained in those, and I encourage you, if you're looking at implementing one of those practices, to do click on that hyperlink and go to that practice information and learn as much as you can about when's the best time of year to implement it. How should I implement it? You know, are there other things that I need to do to implement it? It just gives you a wealth of information. And then, of course, we're going to tie it back. Each of those ag practices are tied back to a soil health principle. And so we have each of the soil health principles that are related to wind erosion and cover crops. That's soil health principle number 1. Number 2, number 3, and number 4. And so that helps you as you're beginning to think about, how do I really use these soil health principles to develop a project? So I'm going to go ahead and let Katie scroll on down. We'll let you kind of read this at your leisure, but I highly encourage you to take a look at this document, print it off, highlight it, make notes, whatever you need to do, and really learn about how you can really improve your soil. And so we have one for cropland, and then as we move to the next page, you'll see we have one for rangeland as well. It's virtually identical format, It's just different practices and different resource concerns. So if you're predominantly working on rangeland, this would be the one where you would want to focus most of your attention. Again, this would be a good thing to read through before, during, and after the conservation planning visit from NRCS to really have a lot of information, have a lot of questions to ask, and things like that. So that's the Rangeland Resource Concern Guide sheet. And then as Katie scrolls to the bottom of that, we're going to come to the all new information this year. And I just saw a question pop up from Jill M. that what if we have both cropland and rangeland? Okay, if you have both land types involved in a project, we do ask you to fill out both conservation planning templates. They can likely do that in the same field visit, but if you have both land types, we do ask you to fill out both conservation planning templates. But as we move to this is something, like I said, entirely new this year. This is our proven practice chart. And what we've done here is we've gone back through the years of the Healthy Soil Program, and we've really looked at the quarterly reports that you've sent. We've looked at pictures that you've sent, but we've also talked to a multitude of producers that have participated in the program. And these are the practices that we see are proven to have a positive benefit on soil health. And so the way to use this chart is pretty simple. You look over at the practice that you may be thinking about implementing. And so let's take first one, cover crop. So we have a cover crop. Well, you can use cover crops on cropland, rangeland, orchard land, subsistence gardens, community gardens, backyard gardens. And so it tells you that that can be, a cover crop can be utilized on virtually all land types. But then we've done something else for you. We've listed what we see as probably the most essential non-durable good that you're going to have to purchase in order to implement a cover crop, and that is a multi-species cover crop mix. And so we have some non-durable goods. We'll get into this a little bit more when we go to the budget, but we've kind of helped you out here to understand some of the non-durable good purchases that may be needed to implement a variety of these practices. But then we also have some of the associated durable goods. Now, I will make mention here. We have a no-till drill listed here that may or may not be eligible for the Healthy Soil Program as far as a reimbursable activity to actually purchase a no-till drill, but it is required to actually implement a cover crop. And so that's the way this chart's designed, is to help you understand everything that would be needed to implement it. Again, some of these items may not be eligible for reimbursement through the program, but it is still needed to implement the practice. And then finally, we have the associated facilitating services. This could be hiring a contractor to actually plant your no-till crop, or renting a no-till drill, things of that nature. And so we've listed those facilitating services. And then finally, please do not ignore this last column. This is special considerations. In order to implement this, applicants must justify their seeding rates if greater than NRCS recommended seeding rates. So as I mentioned earlier, when you're visiting with your conservation planner, they may not be able to provide it that day, but they will provide you with some recommended seeding rates for cover crops. And if you have a rate in your budget timeline that is greater than the NRCS recommended rate, we will definitely need to see a justification for that rate if it exceeds the NRCS recommended rate. And so we've done that with a multitude of practices, and we've provided as much information as we possibly can to you to help you put together a quality grant application. You'll see we have compost, other organic-based soil amendments. I think, Katie, if she scrolls down, we have range seeding, cropland conversion to rangeland, bell grazing, prescribed grazing. All of these have a definite positive impact on soil health if implemented correctly and based on NRCS recommendations. And so Again, I encourage you to take this document, print it off, highlight it, write on it, make notes, mark it up. It's okay, and but use this document as much as you can. So I think at this point we'll go back to the website, and I think we're still doing pretty good on time. Um, and so I think we went over kind of the project development. You will notice right there, kind of in the middle of that screen, there's some questions you may want to ask yourself as you're really developing your project. Which of the soil health related natural resource concerns that were identified during conservation planning will my project focus on? So you really need a focus point. It may be two or three, it may only be one. But you really need to decide which resource concerns you're going to focus on. You need to think about which soil health principles will best address those resource concerns. And then moving beyond that, which agriculture practices that NRCS recommended to you will you be able to put into place to address those resource concerns? In addition, again, I want to remind you of the extended grant period. We encourage you to plan these practices so that they fall within the July 2025 to September 2026 timeframe. But use that timeframe as best you can to get quality projects implemented during that time frame. And then you also need to decide what goods and services are needed to implement those ag practices. Where will you get those products, and what are the actual costs of those products that you're going to utilize? And so there's a lot of research that's going to go into this. You're probably going to have to make some calls to maybe some seed companies, or some local companies, some contractors that may need to help. You may need help drilling a crop, or something like that. So you're going to have to spend a little time, and that's where we ask you to spend the most time is actually determining, what it's going to cost, and because as we move on to step number 4, which is the next step, this is where you will actually work on your online application. And one of the first things you're going to do is the budget and timeline template, or timeline and budget template. I always get that backwards. This is where you're actually going to explain to us the when or the what you're doing, uh, when you're doing it, and how much it's going to cost. And so I think Katie's going to pull us up a budget and timeline template. And the first thing you're going to have to do is actually download that and do save it to your own computer. Do not work on the online one because you may lose your work. And so you must save this to your computer so that you're actually working on the document and it will save. And then you can submit it later to us as a completed template. So you'll need to click on that, download it to your computer. But for today, what we're going to do, Katie's going to pull up a sample that I created. Just to kind of help you think about how to do a budget, some tips on some things that are better not to do. But the very first thing we want to encourage you to do is on the bottom there. There's a tab for directions. Click on that. Always read the directions because there's a lot of good information here. And I think Katie had something that she kind of brought in earlier on the eligible entity side, and I'm going to go ahead and let her open up and because I can't remember what she talked about.
All good, Dean. Thank you. So yes, to Dean's point, read over these instructions. They're very straightforward. Main thing, keep this in Excel format. So if you export it to Google and work on a Google Drive document, you want to make sure you don't do that. You may be tempted to do that. Keep it in Excel. That will keep the formulas intact. And that way you don't have to do the work of, pulling out your calculator to do all the math behind what you're ultimately submitting to us for a budget request. You'll see that on the second tab. So keep it in Excel format. Refer to that FAQ as you have questions. Be brief in your descriptions, but specific in your descriptions. Dean offers a good example when we get to tab 2. Make sure you're doing things in order in terms of time, how your project activities will go. We wanted to point this out to you that you'll notice when we get to tab 2, there's a built-in table for you to show us what all comprises your cover crop mix, if in fact you're requesting funding to do a cover crop. And last but not least, having kept this form in its Excel format, you'll be ready to upload it as part of your online application. So I'll click over here and Dean will explain how to go about completing this document.
Thank you, Katie. Um, just first and foremost, as you see on the very top of this document, there in green, it will say fiscal year 2026 individual applicant budget. If you happen to pull up one that says eligible entity budget, you have the wrong one. We do ask that you fill out the individual applicant budget if you're applying as an individual applicant. And so that's your first key to look for that green deal on the top right there to let you know that you're actually working on the right one. As we kind of move through, I'm going to hit the three big columns in the middle. We have columns broken out to non-durable goods. These are your short-lived items like cover crop seed, compost, mulch, biochar, things of that nature. Those will all fall under the non-durable goods category. And so these are the things that basically you will expend these in one way or another during the grant period, and they will be used up basically. The next big column is a little bit different color there. These are where you're going to place your durable goods, and we'll talk about that just a little bit more here in a second. But these are those long-lived items like PVC pipe, T-posts, wire, livestock drinkers, things of that nature that are going to live beyond the grant period. And so when you put those items in your budget, they will need to be under the durable goods category. And then finally finishing up the third big item of reimbursable activities. These are the services, and these include specialized work that is performed by a business. This could be hiring a business to no-till drill a cover crop for you. This could be, as we're going to talk about here in just a minute, paying a company to complete a soil test. And so anything that is a service, it's a specialized service performed by a business, you will put in that services category or services column right there. So as you go through the budget, I will scroll all the way to the left. The very first thing I want you to look at is the timeline, because this is how you're actually going to implement your practice. So, again, thinking about that expanded timeline, you're going to have first quarter activities, second quarter activities, third quarter, and fourth quarter. You can see each of those quarters has a corresponding date range. And so when you begin to think about, you look at your conservation plan, and the planner recommended that in August of 2025, you're going to do this particular practice, that would be in the first quarter. And so you need to see in a chronological order how you're going to implement this project. The next kind of, I'll say, major column there is you're actually going to tell us what you're going to do. This is the project activity, and this is where you actually say what I'm going to do. I'm going to drill a cover crop. I'm going to test my soil. Things of that nature. And so that's how you'll fill out this budget timeline template. Once you've kind of perused the template and kind of see how it works, the very first thing you're going to do is put in your soil testing, your baseline soil testing. It's so important. We already have it partially filled out for you. So it's going to occur in the first quarter. It has to occur before any other project activities. So again, it's right there for you. You don't even have to click on anything other than as we scroll over to the services side, you're going to identify the lab or the business that is actually going to complete the soil test. And so for this example, we're going to put XYZ Soil Lab, and they are the ones. You must identify a company that you're gonna submit your soil test to. The next thing you're going to do is determine how many soil tests you got to do. This is where you actually need to work with your planner and ask them, how many soil tests are reasonable out here? Whether it's one soil test or five soil tests, you need to ask them what's reasonable. Make that justification in your application. But for this example, we're going to put that we're going to do two soil tests. The unit of measure I've already put in here is a soil test. That's pretty simple. And then you're going to again have to do a little bit of research and call that lab and say, okay, I want to do this type of soil test. How much is it going to cost me? And you'll put that cost per soil test here. For this example, up at $62.50. And you'll notice it automatically calculates it. Like Katie said, you do not have to use your calculator. This will figure it out for you. And so the only thing you have to know is how many soil tests you want to do and how much they're going to cost per soil test, and it calculates it for you. So as we begin to think about the remainder of our project, this is where you actually need to look at, okay, what am I going to do? When am I going to do it? And how much am I going to do? Okay. So for this example, I'm going to go ahead and use on the first quarter, we're going to plant you'll notice there's a drop down. I forgot to mention the drop down box there. You can select which quarter you're doing it in. Um, so for this first one, you're going to select the first quarter. This is going to occur between July and August of 2025. Again, that next column, what are you doing? We're going to drill a fall cover crop mix. And then that's going to be a non-durable good. And so this first box that you're going to fill in is you're going to actually describe what that non-durable good is. So in this example, this is a fall cover crop mix. And since this is going to be drilled as a complete mix, all in one field, we're going to list all of the different species here: winter peas, turnips, tillage radish, cereal rye, winter oats, hairy vetch, whatever your mix is, list that here. You're going to list the number of pounds that NRCS recommended you purchase. Your unit will be in pounds. Please do not, if Katie will scroll up just a little bit, we have some instructions. Please do not use bags, pickup loads, wheelbarrow loads, whatever it is. We ask for specific measures: pounds, tons, things of that nature. And so think about that when you're filling this out. But we're going to purchase 62 and a half pounds of cover crop, a fall cover crop mix. We called the seed company up, and I know this price. Most people are going to laugh at that because it's not even close. But I was just putting numbers together. It's $1.50 a pound, and again, that tabulates or it calculates it for you. You don't have to do anything. That cost is going to be $93.75. The one thing I do encourage you, as you're coming up with that cost per pound, please include any applicable shipping or taxes that may be necessary to get that cost to or that seed to your house. So that should be an all-inclusive price per pound. So you might have to do a little math in the background when the company tells you, it's going to be $1 for the seed, 25 cents for shipping, and 25 cents for bagging. You're going to have to add that up and figure out that it's going to be $1.50 a pound. So please include any applicable costs such as shipping or taxes. And then you'll notice we go over to the services tab. If this is necessary as part of your application, you might have to hire somebody to plant that crop. And so we're going to drill, again, describe what you're doing. You're going to drill a fall cover crop. You're going to identify the specific business. In this instance, put D&J Custom Farming. They're going to drill 1.5 acres. So they're gonna 1.5 is your amount. It's a per acre cost, and they're gonna charge you $15 per acre to drill to drill that, and so your total cost is going to be $22.50. And so that again, it calculates automatically. You don't have to worry about it. So if Katie will scroll over to the right, I actually have this that blue the new little portion of the spreadsheet filled out for a cover crop recommendation. So this is to aid you in developing your seed mixes. So we've added this table in here so that to kind of give you a little extra help in developing a seed mix. So if you are requesting a cover crop, we do ask you to fill out this table. There on the left-hand side, we have the intended seeding date. Again, that should tie back to the quarter in which you're going to complete it in. And so this is going to be a fall cover crop, September 2025 for this example. Okay. You're going to identify the mix name or the species that are included. So you're going to list all of that here. You're going to list the field or pasture name that you're going to be planting that in. For this example, it's field 12. And then you're going to list the NRCS recommended seeding rate. So let's say NRCS recommended 50 pounds per acre. We've got 1.25 acres. That comes out to 62 and a half pounds. So that will help you calculate your different seeding rates, and then you can just plug that information right back into the budget template so that you can have that information right there. Now, what I want to go through next is a way that we recommend you don't do it this way, and I'll explain why. You see the first one, I just put everything in one block because you're going to purchase it as one mix, okay? But I encourage you not to do it the second way, and the reasoning by it is if you list each individual species with each individual pounds, each individual cost, and some of those costs change or a species is not available, then you're actually going to have to do a formal budget adjustment, okay? Because it's now tied, turnips are now tied to a line item. And so if you call and turnips are no longer available, you're going to actually have to do a formal budget adjustment to substitute a species. However, in the previous example that I showed you first, you have a total mix. If you find out that turnips are not available, you call us and you say, well, you work through your project sponsor and you let us know that, hey, turnips are not available. Can I substitute a species? And it's an easy substitution for us. It's not a formal budget adjustment. And so I encourage you to group your practices as best you can. I mean, if it's a completely different practice, do not group it. But if it's a cover crop mix, please group it if it's going to be installed at the same time on the same field and it's the same mix. So please group it if possible. So that's second example where I listed out each individual species. We encourage you not to use that approach, and so I hope this is not confusing, but we encourage you not to use that approach. One other thing we want to move on to is the services side. You're going to notice that I kind of, again, this is the approach that we do not want. Of course, we have drill a fall cover crop, but gold star for anybody in the chat that can tell me what I did wrong on this one. That's really kind of not what we like. So I'll give you just a second to see if anybody's paying attention or if you've already fell asleep. There we go. Okay, perfect. I'm not sure who got the gold star. There was two of you that jumped in there real quick, but yes, you're correct. I did not name the specific business that is going to be implementing this service for me, and so I just put contractor. That's vague. That doesn't tell us who's going to do it, and so we need to correct that. And so gold star to, I think there was like three of you that jumped in there real quick. So appreciate you that you're still paying attention. Real quick, we're going to look at some durable goods. It's kind of the same basic principle that I'm using on these durable goods. So we know that a fence is a durable good. It's an item that's going to last beyond the grant period. And so for this second quarter item, we're going to build an electric fence to manage our livestock grazing. And so what I did was I put electric fence, and in parentheses, I included the charger, the insulators, the posts, the wire, the gate handles. There may be some other things that might be included in an electric fence, but that's what I included. And I put the total installed length. So we're going to install 150 linear feet. Again, we want a specific unit, and it's going to cost $3.50 per foot. Okay, that's the best way to do that because if for some reason you decide to list those out, like the second example there that Katie's going to highlight, each of those items now has an individual line item. And if for some reason you got a screaming deal on insulators and you got them for 75 cents a piece versus, $1.50, but then the cost of your charger went up $25, that would require a formal budget adjustment so that you could shift some funding around. However, if it's all listed as one item, which it's going to be installed as one item, which is perfectly fine. It's all going to be installed as one item. If for some reason some of those costs shift up and down just a little bit, that's okay because it's all under one line item. You're going to purchase it and install it as one line item. And so we highly encourage you again to group those practices that are going to be installed as one unit, whether it be a cover crop, maybe an electric fence. You could also look at maybe installing a livestock drinker, so you can include, pipeline and the drinker and the faucet, all as one unit because it's going to be installed as one unit and is designed to function as one unit. And that way, it eliminates the need to sometimes do a budget adjustment where you might not need one. After all. And so, if I haven't completely confused you at this point on the budget timeline template, please enter your questions in the chat if you have some. But again, as you're going through this, if you do have questions, if you're confused, if something doesn't look right, or if for some reason you're not sure how to group some of these items as line items, please give us shoot us an email, give us a call. We'll provide our contact information just a little bit later because we do want to help you as much as possible through this application process so that you can have every bit of chance of success with your project. So at this time, I'm going to let Katie go back to, I believe, the website at this time. And again, hold those questions. If you have budget questions, please hold them and we'll answer them at the end. We should be doing pretty good on time. We've got a little bit left.
Yeah, it's 4:10, so 20 minutes left in our schedule. I'll speed up my next step, but I want to quickly illustrate some things you'll need to do down here. So of course, this is a self-tabulating document, as Dean has mentioned. All the costs that you have researched and put into this document will show up right here as your project funds. There's a little bit more work to be done here. And this will self-calculate. So your project sponsor gets a 15% administrative fee, basically for helping shepherd you through the process. They will accept your receipts, submit those to us as an invoice. We reimburse them, they reimburse you. So you don't have to eat all of your expenses for all of your project at once or save them to the end to get reimbursed. We'll reimburse you a little at a time, a little at a time, a little at a time. So bottom line is, here's your project funds. Don't forget that your administrative fee will be paid by NMDA to the project sponsor. Here we ask you to document how far is it that your project sponsor has to travel to come out to see you. If it's 15 miles, we want to make sure that your project sponsor gets paid for that round trip to come see you. This is your total award, and this is the amount that cannot exceed $25,000. It cannot be $25,000 or above. Got to be south of that figure. So I wanted to illustrate that for you right quick before we switch back to the website. So let me toggle us back to our one-stop shop, the place where you will find every little thing that you need to apply for a Healthy Soil Program grant. So I think our next step is to walk through the grant application itself. And this is the one place where you will take all of these different things you've worked on that we've talked about today, and you put them together in one spot. Boom, that becomes your application, the thing that has to be completed and submitted on time by March 19th. That's noon that day. That's our deadline. So let me click over there and show you what you will see once you land. And this is the page that will welcome you to all of the funding opportunities that NMDA has available. I'll very quickly illustrate, you know you're an individual applicant if you're coming to us as an individual, a business, or a nonprofit. We don't want you to get confused right here. Notice this says grants. So if you're set up to go with your conservation plan, you're good to apply for funding. If February 21st comes and goes and you still don't have conservation planning, you haven't called NRCS, you can't even think of the acronym of the agency, this is where you'll wind up, okay? So there's no funding associated with this conservation planning opportunity. Rather, it's for those who aren't able to get conservation planning done in time and need a little bit of extra time. So this particular opportunity puts you in good stead, puts you in the pipeline for next year. So get all your things done so that you can apply for grant funding. This is where you want to land. I'll show you the guidelines right quick. Again, covering the project implementation timeframe, reminding you of the funding cap here, and taking you back to the website if you need more information. I'll go ahead and press submit. So it's going to ask me to log in here. Do that very quickly to show you what's on the other side. Okay, if you don't have an account with Submittable, it's free, it's easy to set one up. You will need an account. I'm typing in my password and logging in. Don't want to save that here. Okay, and you can see it's thinking. I'll close up this other document to speed things up a tad. The first thing you will encounter as the form starts to populate, just a few basic questions to make sure you're in the right place. So are you applying as an individual, business, or nonprofit? I'll pretend I'm making application. Okay. Actually, we're right within the application itself. So let me back us up to where we start. All right. So we start with a few questions about who you are as the applicant. Who will be financially responsible for this project? Meaning, who's the person who's actually going to the seed company to buy the seed that will later reimburse you for? That's the person that will ultimately set up the contract arrangement with. Who helped you with this online application? What's the relationship between those two parties? Who's the project lead? Who's actually the boots on the ground doing the work? Probably the same person as is making the seed purchase, unless you've got a partner in this effort. We ask if you've applied for a grant before. We ask your relationship to the land. If you've read the legislation that created our program, this language will be familiar to you. We invite you, but don't require you, to declare if you're part of a certain community that's mentioned in the Healthy Soil Act. Young producers, veterans, small farmers, etc. Now we shift into the land. So where is the project site located? Perhaps it's on tribal lands. If so, we invite you to name the tribal lands on which the project is going to occur. Where is it located? Give us an address or coordinates. The amount of land, as Dean mentioned, it can be square feet. Maybe you have a community garden. It can be in acres. Maybe you operate a big ranch. You'll declare that amount of land here. And if you tell us the amount of land in square feet, just be advised that the rest of the application, we're going to ask you to use acres, but we provide you some tables to help make those conversions easy. Tell us about the type of land that you're on. And critical here, upload images. So this can be a map of your project site, photos of your project site, drawings of your project site. Maybe you've got a lined sheet of notebook paper. Draw it out. Help us see what you see. Help us visualize the project. That will make the evaluation process much more effective for the reviewer, for the Healthy Soil Program team, and ultimately for you as the applicant. So that's where you will upload those images there using that button. We ask about the market for the products that you're producing. And then we shift into more of the land management type questions. So we want to know the history of the land. We don't want to know about the past 6 months. Was it involved in ag production? Tell us about the current management practices. So this is where you'll get into some of the things that Dean mentioned, cropping sequences, the tillage. Are you running livestock? That sort of set of practices that you're currently doing on the land. Dean mentioned your first thing is to create a soil map or an ecological site description that helps you understand the soils present on your land. You'll take that data and upload it here. We really focused on conservation planning as well to get you started. You're working with NRCS. You're completing that process by February 21st. I will tell you, that's the date to complete that process, not submit paperwork. So again, that document is going to be in your hands for the last month of the application period so that you can study it, review it, read it, share it with others, rest a cup of coffee on it, mark it up like John Madden. Whatever the case may be, spend time with that document. That's the reason for the February 21st deadline, well in advance of March 19th when you need to submit your application. So you're uploading that document here. We ask you basically who you worked with. What NRCS Service Center did you go to? Who was the conservation planner? And that's just in case someone signed a signature in a hurry and we have a hard time deciphering it on the document. Now we shift into your project sponsor. If you're familiar with our program, you know you have two places you can go, if you're a tribal member at least. If you're a tribal member, you can start with your tribal government or go to your soil and water conservation district. If you're not a tribal member, your project sponsor necessarily is your soil and water conservation district. So we ask you to name your project sponsor and who it is that you are working with, who's going to be the point of contact between you and us to make this relationship work. I'll scroll a little quickly here, and we'll step back and look at the letter of support template in just a moment. But that's the document that really formalizes that relationship between you as the person on the ground implementing the project and your project sponsor. Without that relationship, we simply cannot convey state dollars to projects implemented by individuals, by businesses, by nonprofits. So you're uploading your completed letter of support here. Gotta carry some signatures, otherwise we consider it incomplete. Give your project a brief title that will help people get a sense of it when we finally post it as part of the map we showed you that lives on our website. Project summary, we ask for some basic details. Don't skimp. So make sure you're addressing each of these prompts, the amount of land, the land type, the resource concerns, the practices. The reason being, again, we're going to take that 50-word summary and post it as part of our map. Give people a good sense in a brief way of what it is you're doing with your project. You're taking those resource concerns that NRCS helped you identify during conservation planning. You're naming those here. And those become the center of your project, as we've talked about. So make sure that you've listed out the things that are applicable to you, referring to that guidance document if you need some assistance. Okay, you're checking whichever box applies to your project in terms of what soil health principle or principles are you most focused on. We give you a checklist to complete depending on your project practices. So you want to make sure to pay attention there. Here's that conversion table I mentioned earlier from square feet to acres. So you would use that figure going forward to help you address questions about of the practices you're doing on how much land are you doing them. So you click the cover crop box, how many acres will actually be planted to cover crops? If you're going to be mulching, how many acres are actually going to be put to mulching, and so on. If you do request funds for bale grazing, of course, you're prompted to upload a completed bale grazing plan. If you're not asking for bale grazing funds, you won't be asked that prompt. The project narrative is where we want you to be descriptive. So you don't need to be a scientist. We want you to speak in practical terms that are accessible to a very broad audience. Why are you applying? What are the resource concerns at the heart of your project? What are the principles that you're going to wrap around those resource concerns? The practices you're doing? What are your goals? What about possible water shortages? We always have to plan for those in New Mexico. Why is this project important? So again, some very practical pedestrian questions that we ask you to address in less than 500 words. So you'll want to be pithy. And we ask you to shoot for more than 250. so that we have enough information to really get a sense of your project. Dean mentioned that your first activity before you do anything else is soil testing. So you'll explain that approach in this box here. Other evaluation techniques, maybe you're casting a hoop to measure, what sort of forage you have available on your rangeland. Tell us those other ways that you'll evaluate project success. What outcomes do you expect in terms of agriculture, in terms of economic outcomes, social outcomes? You'll want to address those briefly here. We went over the timeline and budget in some real depth today. The reason is it's a full 40 points of the 100 points possible within each of these applications. Make sure you keep that in Excel format, upload it here. And tell us the total amount being requested so we have that up as part of the information supplied within your application, not just within the documents of your application. We want to remind you our FAQ is available, especially for those good questions about eligible and ineligible expenses. Let me just offer the reminder this is a competitive grant program. Funding may need to be scaled back. If we need to come to that point, how do we do that for your project that keeps it intact? So you'll give us some guidance there. If you've got other supporting documents, maybe your neighbor is really on board with your project and wants to support you with some volunteer hours. Get that in writing and make that part of your supporting document. You don't have to have supporting documents. Note that it's optional, no points associated, but it will help give our reviewers a clearer sense of what it is you intend to do with your project. We want to notify you that as you go through the course of implementing your grant, if you're successful, you'll supply us with reports about the progress of your grant. You'll supply videos, photos, those sorts of things. Some of those photos you saw in today's presentation came from current and former grantees. So we just make you aware that we intend to use those materials in promotion of soil health in general, but also the program. So you'll acknowledge that use of material, how you're to be referred to in the promotional materials, say the map, other sorts of things. If you'd like your contact information to be shared, you're welcome to let us know that. We sometimes get requests from people who want to be supportive of our grantees. That's what we would do there. And these last few things are just reminders before you press submit. We want to make sure you're aware of the time frame that we offer these grants on a competitive basis, who our reviewers are, and that Secretary Whitty makes final decisions, that grants are paid in terms of reimbursement. And you can mark your calendar if you're feeling confident about your prospects winning a grant. June 24th, with a time to be set later, that's the day we have set aside to do our grantee training. All right, you'll sign and submit. Really encourage you to save your draft as you go. If you accidentally press submit and go, oh my gosh, I uploaded the wrong thing there, I uploaded it twice. No problem. You can request that your submission be edited, but the deadline does not change. The deadline will remain noon on March 19th. So with that, I'm going to take us back to our website because effectively by this point, Dean, we've walked through all of our steps. We talked about the project sponsorship coming from your tribal government or from your soil and water conservation district. So you're simply taking then this template for completion. You want to make sure you read it, add your information to it about your project, and present it to them for signature. They will be a primary partner for you during the course of the grant. We showed you what it looks like to be on our application submission website. So there we are. And I know we're really close to time. Dean, let's spend some extra time answering questions since we've spent some time going through all the different pieces of the application process. I will take us back to our PowerPoint just very, very briefly so that we can wrap up there and then get to some of those questions that might be lingering for us in the chat. So I'll pause the website. I'm going back to PowerPoint. Just reminding you all that that's the QR code to the web page we were just on. Very briefly, I want to remind you of the time frame here. So we launched our process officially back in the fall. We had a webinar that we stepped through those first few steps back in November. That recording is on the website if you'd like to review it. We launched our online grant application last week. Here we are today, really focused on those final steps of taking all that you've worked on, all you've learned about your soil, about your land, about your project idea, and putting those online in that application, online in that budget form that we showed you earlier. So basically, from today, we've got 1 month. If you've not done conservation planning, you've got less than a month to get it done. You know that February 21st is your deadline to complete that process. Not submit us any paperwork, just complete the process so that you have great information to refer to in the last month of preparing your application. So again, 1 month from today, more or less, is your deadline of February 21st to complete conservation planning. Then you've got another month to study what you learned from conservation planning and fully build out your application, all of the documents to hit submit by noon on March 19th. I'll close out with a couple of brief tips and reminders. You heard Dean say this in different words that where you need to start is with the soil. That's why we're working with an RCS to get started, really seeing what's going on with the soil and identifying the ways to make it better. So we're building from the ground up, literally, with these projects. Not saying, this is what I want to buy. Could I maybe squeeze this into an application for the Healthy Soil Program? It's not the way to think about this program. You're literally building your project from the ground up. We've seen in the past where people have just totally outsourced their application to someone else. A grant was secured by that person and they received their award and said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know I signed up to do all these activities." You don't want to be that person. So don't outsource your application. Stay in the driver's seat, even if you seek some outside support and you're picking other people's brains. You need to be intimately familiar with all aspects of your projects because effectively that's the heart of the contract that we will sign together. So you need to be aware of those activities that you're saying you're going to do. A reminder of the reminders that we've already gone through. So the deadline to complete conservation planning coming up February 21st. Fast forward about a month, and that's March 19th, the deadline to submit all of your documents in that online application we showed you. If it comes in later than noon on March 19th, it's late. And we will not review late proposals, late applications, late incomplete applications, paper applications. So make sure that you're following those steps on our website in the sequence that we've suggested. And last but not least, Dean and I are available right up until March 19th to help you with your questions. So reach out to us. We always recommend that people reach out in writing so that your question's very clear. We can offer you an answer that you can hang your hat on. Sometimes we get those questions that just need to be expressed in real time. Those are fine too, and we welcome your phone calls. So with that, we'll stop here. I'll give everyone a beat to take a screen grab of this QR code. If you'd like to get signed up for our weekly emails, maybe your phone doesn't do QR codes or it's just beyond what you want to do today. That's okay. You can send us an email to this email address here and ask to be subscribed. And basically what we're doing with those weekly emails is just keeping you in the know and keeping you reminded of deadlines, that sort of thing. We'll offer tips and relay questions that we hear from other applicants. So Dean, with that, I'll stop sharing. I know we're over time here, but I want to honor some of the questions that came in while we were presenting. So I'm going to pop open my chat and I see that you've already tackled some. So
Yeah,
we're
I think we've got most of the questions answered, but if there was a question that I didn't get answered, welcome you to pop it into the chat, or we do want to be respectful of your time. You can always contact us at the HSP email. But if there's any pressing questions that weren't answered, we'll give you a minute or so to we'll just let you raise your hand if you feel like it, and you can ask them in real time.
Dean, a question I want to pose to you since we've got a month left. What's the process and turnaround time to get NRCS to approve the conservation plan that is required?
I'll say it's likely going to be less than 2 weeks. You need to get in with your NRCS office as soon as possible, set up an appointment. The actual field visit is likely to take less than a couple hours, unless it's just a large piece of land that you're working on. And then for them to actually turn around and fill it out, in reality shouldn't take more than a week, but understanding that some of the NRCS offices are quite busy, it might take up to 7 to 10 days, somewhere in that neighborhood. But I would recommend, again, get in there as soon as possible. If you haven't contacted them, contact them tomorrow and get with them, and that way you can set up an appointment. But should be less than a couple weeks for sure.
Thank you for that, Dean. And I would add to that, the question says to get on our NRCS to approve the conservation plan. The fact is they're creating it for you. So again, thinking back to the documents that Dean showed us, yes, you'll be asked to identify your goals in terms of soil health, but it's really the conservation planner who's taking those years of technical expertise and applying it to the land that you manage and your particular project site. So they're creating the document as opposed to approving something you yourself have created. I'll scooch down to a question from Kristen. Would a drill that costs less than $4,999 be eligible? And the answer to that is possibly. I say possibly because it has to directly relate to your project. If your project is way over here and you're asking us for a drill, we're going to say, I don't think they need a drill to be doing some of this stuff. But you key in on the threshold, the $5,000 threshold, which applies to all of our durable goods. So whether you're requesting a drinker for your livestock or fencing to manage some of your livestock in a soil health type manner, or maybe you're requesting something that you'd put to use on some cropland, it's got to be beneath that $5,000 threshold. So if both those things are true, that it's perfectly related to your project and it's beneath that $5,000 threshold, we're good to consider that as an eligible request. Okay, Navona asked the question, is there a limit to how much of the budget can go to consultants? Yes, in fact, we spell that out very clearly in our budget template that no more than 10% of project funds can go to a consultant. This is really about on-the-ground improvement of the soil beneath your feet. Okay, I have a direct message that I'll read in just a moment, so we'll shift to some more questions here. Can paid services such as planting, fencing be provided by grant applicant? Dean, I'll pitch that question your way. Can paid services be done by the grant applicant? I'm assuming what's meant here is can the applicant themselves be paid to do those sorts of things?
And the answer to that is fortunately no. Um, you as the applicant, we consider that kind of your skin in the game is to provide that service, completing some of those practices for your own project. And so, unfortunately, no.
Okay, and I'm gonna keep ticking through some questions. And Dean, feel free to jump in here if something is just really leaping off the page for you that you'd like to address. I see some eligible versus ineligible expense questions. Highly encourage you to visit the FAQ. That's our frequently asked questions document that we've added to over the years as we've seen people request things that just aren't related enough to soil health to be considered eligible. One of those examples is a hoop house. So that is not eligible for funding under our program.
Well, there's a question that just came in. How do you differentiate between a consultant and a contractor? Contractors typically providing a service such as installation of a cover crop or something like that, versus a consultant who is I guess basically consulting on the overall project. But I know we just need to maybe discuss that a little bit further on, what the specifics that they were completing were. But as a general rule, a contractor would be completing a service such as no-till drilling a crop, say maybe removing an invasive species from the land or something like that. And a consultant is actually advising on land management. That's how I would view the differentiation. Then there's also a question, again, about the durable goods. The durable goods limit is $4,999.99 per functional unit. And so what we mean by this is a unit that functions as one. And so if a fence functions as one fence, I mean, which it will, the limit on materials and goods to complete that fence is $4,999.99. I'm thinking there may have been a little bit of confusion from earlier, but it is per functional unit that durable goods limit.
A good question here from Robin. When the amount of land in this fiscal year project differs from the total land of the property intended for the healthy soil restoration, which do you enter on submittable? What we're really concerned about, Robin, is what's your project site? So where you intend to do the practices that you will seek reimbursement from us to do, tell us that amount of land. So you may farm a big piece of land or ranch on a great big piece of land, but if your project is limited to 1 acre, tell us it's 1 acre. We're asking about the size of the project site itself. Champ asks a good question. Dean, will there be changes since last year to soil assessment methods on either crop or range?
And so the answer to that is no. The soil assessments will remain the same. The infield assessments will remain the same as they were last year. We've determined that those are really good baseline assessments for a producer to implement in the field. They're simple, but they yield a lot of information for a producer to gain from doing those infield assessments. So they will remain the same.
Okay. A question from David. If there's no ag production currently happening on the land, how should one answer the question about primary market for products? That's very specific, and I don't have that set of possible answers committed to memory, David, but I can look at that and offer an answer offline. Unless, Dean, you have something committed to memory there.
No, I don't.
Okay. I'm going to scroll back up to a question from Sean, I believe, and forgive me if I've mispronounced. Does this have to be for land that is already actively being farmed, or can funds be used to make land more amenable for growing?
And I believe Katie went over one of the questions in the application that the is this land involved in ag production for the previous 6 months? And so that will have a bearing on the overall evaluation of the project. And so we do lean towards those lands that are already in production, but I would allow Katie to expand on that if she has another take on it or a different take.
I don't. Uh, I was thinking about this question from Shelley. If we have equipment that sends data electronically to a computer, is a modest laptop a possible durable good? I would say no. So what we're looking for each of the things that shows up within your budget, each of those line items, is that they directly point back to soil health. So let me give you a somewhat related for instance. One year we saw an application for a ton of lumber and for some heavy duty equipment to put it all together, some power tools. This person posed those materials and the project as being one to create, compost bins. I would ask you, what guarantee do we have that compost bins are actually to be created there and not a storage shed, let's say, for that person's yard equipment? So if the thing is not directly tied to soil health and cannot be immediately used for the project, it's out of bounds for purchase. Dina, is there any extra context you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that hits it on the head that it has to have a direct impact on soil health and on the project itself.
Okay. I see someone here in the chat asking for some help with the ecological site description. So I'd invite you to reach out to us directly, and that's information I'll drop in the chat here shortly. Dean, it's 4:40, so I guess we'll just offer it one more time to people to raise their hand so that we can invite them to unmute. Maybe there's a burning question that just doesn't fit in the chat quite right. But as we invite those people to share their questions, I'm going to put some contact information in the chat.
Again, if we haven't got to your question or you sleep on it tonight and you come up with a question tomorrow or 2 weeks down the line, please take note of the information that Katie's putting in the chat, and please reach out to us. We'd be glad to help you with your project development and or any questions you may have about eligible items or things like that. Please reach out to us.
And Dean, I'll ask you to tackle those last few questions I see coming in just as I complete typing what I'm typing into the chat here, please.
Okay, there's a question from Gabriella. Can we give the example on buying extra materials due to a good deal is not covered? Okay. Basically, we will only reimburse what is requested through the budget. So if you have 75 insulators in the budget and you're able to purchase 100, we're only going to reimburse you for 75. And so I hope that's the gist of that question. But basically, what you put in the budget, that's essentially the only thing we can reimburse you for, and that's why we ask you to be specific on the number requested and everything else.
Okay, it took me a minute, but oh, let me get this dropped into the chat here. Some contact information that you're welcome to copy and paste. Maybe you've already got it saved elsewhere, but people coming new to the program, that first link will take you to our homepage. If you'll scroll down that page, you'll see the map of previously funded projects. You'll see a place to get signed up for our weekly emails. And then further on down, I offer our email address to reach out to Dean and me and other members of the Healthy Soil Program team, get those answers back from us in writing. You're also welcome to call us if you want to have a real-time chat. So I've offered a phone number there. And Dean, with things having slowed down in the chat, I'll trust that everyone has what they need to get moving. They know they need to pick up the phone and call NRCS and their potential project sponsor if they've not already done so. They know to develop their project, to get to work on that online application, to focus some time and energy on that timeline and budget template. And then we've got a deadline of March 19th to get it all submitted online. So we thank you all for attending this afternoon, and I'll turn it back over to you, Dean, for some closing comments.
Yeah, I just want to state again, we thank you for your time this afternoon. We thank you for the great questions. If you have anything that comes up, please shoot us an email, give us a call, and we'll be happy to help you with your application. We encourage you to apply for the program and help in participating in improving the overall soil health of New Mexico.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.